Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. My name is Alida Stegler, and I would like to warmly welcome you to this Law Transform webinar in collaboration with the Rafto Foundation for Human Rights and Amnesty International's Norway. Between the Rafto Foundation and the Law Transform, this event is also part of our ongoing webinar series focusing on human rights. The Rafto Foundation, based in Bergen, Norway, is a non-profit organization dedicated to the global promotion of human rights, while the Center Law Transform, which is a collaboration between the University of Bergen and the Christian Michelsen Institute, is a center that aims to understand how rights and law are used as tools to reach social change and to what effect. And today, our event will focus on how life is in Turkey now and how has it been under President Erdogan. And before I say anything more, I would like to shortly mention and recommend all of you to check out our web pages and to follow us on Facebook to see and read more about our ongoing research and upcoming events. And now I would like to give the word to Iver Ørstavik from Rafto Foundation. He is a senior advisor at the Rafto Foundation, and he also heads the partnership engagement with Rafto's most recent laureates. So Iver, the floor is yours, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy and pleased to be able to work with Law Transform on this subject, which sadly has been a little forgotten in recent years because of all the trouble happening elsewhere. But Turkey is an incredibly important country at the crossroads between three continents and even more cultures, very tightly linked with the European system through various treaties and political arrangements. And the development is troublesome. So Turkey has, of course, oscillated between more democratic and more authoritarian phases, and we're moving in an authoritarian direction now and have been for some time. The main shift maybe took place around 2007 when the EU accession process more or less stopped. Then we had a critical move in 2013 when the opposition party HDP for the first time managed to block a clear majority by the ruling party AKP. This fortunate election was quickly changed. And then in 2016, we had the coup, which initiated a period of repression lasting until today and accelerating. We are in troubling times, and it's more than justified to spend time on considering the development in Turkey and where we might go from here. We're extremely lucky to have great speakers with us today. I'll just present them very quickly and then we'll get on with it. Our main speaker is Idil Eser. She is former director of Amnesty. She has a master's degree from Columbia, and in 2017 she was among a group later called the Istanbul 10, arrested and charged with terrorism accusations and suffering some really troubling times in Turkish jails. And some of them are still there. Mrs. Eser, she got out. She now works at the Norwegian Center for Human Rights and keeps track of the general situation in Turkey. So she will present us with a broad picture of the many issues of concern. And then we have two very excellent scholars to supplement her. We have Isil Kurnaz. She works in Turkey and is still able to participate. We're really grateful for that. She has a PhD in law from Kent University and has worked on human rights law at Lund as well. And then in these times of the corona pandemic and isolation, it's a pleasure to be in contact with some live people. So on my side here, I have Gökhan, who has a PhD from Zurich and has worked in several universities across Europe. He is also a specialist on constitutional law and democracy and has written a book you might look at on sovereign referenda. Of course, we come from a country grounded on the myth of the importance of sovereign referenda. So check that one out. I think I'll leave it at that. Our subject matter should be of great interest to many, I hope, and I'm sure looking forward to hear Idil tell us more about it. So please, the waves are yours. Idil.
Hello, everyone. Nice seeing you, at least digitally. I would try to be as short as possible, but as you know, Turkey's human rights agenda is quite full, so I'll try to finish everything in 15 minutes or 20 minutes. First, freedom, we'll start with the freedom of expression. Freedom of expression only exists at this stage for the ones who praise the government. Anyone who dares to criticize the government is arbitrarily detained, vilified, and if totally unlucky, will be arrested. We see the same kind of problem with the case of retired admirals. I'm not exactly sure how many of them were there, either 103 or 104. But they had the unlucky initiative to declare their opinions about international Montreux agreements and whether people who are in the army should dress in religious garbs. And now they are in detention in Ankara, at least 10 of them who are assumed to be the instigators of this statements. It's a basic freedom of expression event, in my opinion, but we will see how it will play out. As you know, Freedom House has called Turkey at its lowest point in the last 30 years. And according to Reporters Without Borders, Turkey ranks 154th country in the World Press Freedom Index. And since 2016, more than 200 journalists or media workers have been imprisoned. And in 2020, last year, 48 journalists have spent at least one day in police custody. And every day you can read about journalists getting in and out of prison. I think even specialized professional organizations have problems in telling up the numbers because it's such a high turnover rate, people going in prison, people getting out of detention, or people convicted. As soon as people are convicted, they are reduced from this tally of numbers, unfortunately. What are their crimes, the journalists? How do they end up being detained? I mean, writing some sort of a news item about how the government deals with corona pandemic, Kurdish issue, Syrian refugees, increasing value of US dollar against Turkish lira can also be reasons for you to be detained. So it would give you an idea about how freedom of expression is exercised in Turkey. So unless you are praising the government and singing hymns to the glory of the president, you are in dire straits. And judiciary, which I'm sad to say has lost its independence to a very large extent, has become the tool of oppression. And laws are used against anyone that has a dissenting opinion to be crushed and pay the price. For example, Can Dündar, who was the editor of Cumhuriyet newspaper some time ago, he published an article about armed shipment of arms to Syria. And now he lives in Germany. He was sentenced to 27.5 years of prison. And yesterday or 2 days ago, with a new executive order, all his estates were confiscated by the states, along with well-known terrorists. Terrorism is or insulting the president is a very well-used theme for suppression of dissent, frankly speaking. I'm also being accused of being a terrorist. Well, not exactly being a terrorist, but aiding and abetting two terrorist organizations simultaneously. So it's not a very hard thing to do, frankly speaking. Everyone can become a terrorist, and every kind of activity can be termed as terrorist-related activity. So no wonder there are a huge number of people in Turkish prisons who are called terrorists. The problem with the media is not only the oppression of journalists, but also the ownership issue. 90% of the printed media is owned by pro-government people, pro-government businessmen. And there are only a couple of those surviving printed media or TV channels that try to survive as independent entities. And they have problems in receiving public money for their efforts. And two of the main news agencies are controlled by the governments. There's also one regional news agency which is more pro-Kurdish, but it doesn't work on a national level. One of the other problems that are sometimes neglected in that kind of reports was the issue of press cards. The press cards were issued by the president's palace, president's office, and they were quite selective in issuing press cards, denying many well-known journalists press cards because they were writing dissenting news or dissenting opinions. Luckily, Council of States recently said that that kind of unambiguous criteria in giving out press cards is not acceptable, and it should be changed. We will see if it will make any difference in the implementation. If I have learned anything in my life as a Turkish citizen of so many years, is you should never get happy or excited too fast. Everything can go both ways. Or by the same token, you shouldn't also should not get very depressed very easily, because things may change. It's a very dynamic kind of situation, and anything can happen. The problem is not only the pressure on media. There's a similar kind of pressure on all kinds of civil society organizations, from NGOs to trade unions, everything. In 2020, in December, they passed on a new law about NGOs, presumably to be in line with the UN's policy of fighting against the finance of terrorism. But the problem is in some of the articles that were put into this law works only to suppress civil society work, because this law allows security forces, Ministry of Interior Affairs, to assign a public official to the administration of any non-governmental organization if somebody, a professional or in the elected capacity, is under investigation for terrorism offenses. So in my case, because I was the executive director of Amnesty Turkey, both I and the chair of Amnesty were under investigation. They could have assigned a public official to Amnesty years ago. And since our trial process has not been over yet, they could have changed, fired everyone in it and changed the policies. And if we had money, they would have taken over our budget as well. We don't know how this law will be implemented because they haven't published the regulations and other documents related to its implementation yet. But I can see that it will be some sort of a Damocles sword that will be kept over the heads of every civil society organization. There's also a similar type of threats over other civil society organizations. They passed a law for the Bar Association, undermining the structure of Bar Association and using Corona pandemic as some sort of excuse. They didn't allow Bar Association to have its Congress. They will have, they are trying to do a similar kind of thing to the Turkish Medical Association, medical chambers. They haven't succeeded yet, but I can say that it's definitely in their aim to do so. So they have undermined the works of lawyers. Many lawyers have also been detained, accused, and arrested, also on the basis of their professional work. The main argument is if you are defending people who are accused of terrorism, you must be terrorists as well. So we also have a large number of lawyers in prisons at the moment. In the case of human rights organizations, they generally tend to attack people instead of organizations at this stage. For example, Eren Keskin, who is a very well-known human rights lawyer, have been sentenced to more than 6 years. And her sentence is not final yet. I mean, she has appeal processes going on. But she has been systematically attacked over the years, and she has also been subject to monetary punishments. First, they used lots of cases against her to extract monetary compensation. I think she owes something like 450,000 Norwegian kronas to all those people who won the cases. And above that, she also has to go to prison if her sentence is confirmed by the Court of Cassation. This is also true in the case of Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu. Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu is quite important in my view, because he comes from an Islamic background. He was the previous head of Mazlum Dar once upon a time. He also lost his job with an executive order. And he tried something like 6 months, a year to find a job. He finally found a job as a doctor. He's a medical doctor. And he was given the opportunity to be an MP from Pro-Kurdish Party, HDP. And he did a wonderful job for defending the rights of people in prisons, people in detention. And he was very objective, very vocal, very active in his work. And I can say that he is an example to everyone, because he did his job incredibly well and very effectively. And he was sentenced soon for a tweet of a news item that he tweeted years ago. And for that news article, the medium which published it originally has not been sentenced. They haven't been subject to any investigation, but Gergerlioğlu is sentenced, and his appeal processes ended up very fast, and he was stripped of his MP status incredibly fast. And now he's in Silivri prison, he's in Silivri. And he is subject to the worst kind of treatment that he talked about. I think they are just doing it on purpose. So two types of people are especially targeted in this government policy. One of them are women. Strong, independent women are targeted, like Eren Keskin, a woman who talks her mind and does her business. Also Şebnem Kurur Fincancı, she is also the head of Turkish Medical Association at this stage. She used to be the General Secretary of Turkish Human Rights Foundation. She's also the type that they don't like. The second type of person, if you come from an Islamic background, you are also targeted more ferociously, because they try to give the message, in my opinion, how dare you can come from a similar background as we do and think differently and criticize us. So these type of people are especially vulnerable under pressure, but as we know, most of the arrests and the policies are so arbitrary. Everyone can feel the heat of Erdogan's police state, I would say, and end up in prison. So let me, I have zillions of other information, but okay. Because I was one of the other examples of how the things change in Erdogan is related to Osman Kavala and Demirtaş sentences. European Court of Human Rights have given opinions for the immediate release. They have given decisions, lasting decisions, but still it hasn't been implemented, which is a very bad sign for the respect of law. And they have even stated, the ministries, the president even have said that, you know, they will not respect European Court of Human Rights decisions, Constitutional Court decisions. They are not bound by those decisions. So we hope that Kavala and Demirtaş decisions are implemented. And I should also note that there are Article 18 violation decisions, which is not given very lightly. So the council said that they gave Turkey time till the end of July. So if it is implemented, I would expect them to do something about it. If not, the respectability of European Court of Human Rights decisions will be up in the air and gone, not only for Turkey, but also for other states who will be acting in a similar fashion. Another thing that needs to be emphasized is Erdogan's desire to change the rules when they lose any kind of game. We can see it in Istanbul municipal elections. They lost the first election, the first count, with a margin of 11,000, and they renewed the elections. This time they lost with 800,000 votes. So they had to accept it. What they did was they tried to strip, they didn't try, they managed. They stripped Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality of its various rights and responsibilities. For example, they took the ownership of Gezi Park, which was the event, which was the site of Gezi events in 2013. Various public hospitals, various touristic hospitals, and transferred ownership to a defunct foundation, which means it's basically controlled by the General Directorate of Foundations. And they also took the rights of assigning general managers to the central government or other entities which are controlled by AKP. They also went after Canan Kaftancıoğlu, who was the head of the main opposition party's Istanbul structure, and she was sentenced to 9 years and 8 months for 4 or 6 tweets that she tweeted years ago, between 2012 and 2017. She will also serve a sentence if her case is finalized by the Court of Cassation. So they'll go after you. They will go through your social media post and you will be paying a price. That's the message that is underlined over and over again. I think I have talked enough, more than necessary even. So
Well,
I can answer questions later if it is it.
thank you so much. There's so much to grapple with here. I will pass the ball on to Isil immediately. Just mention for all of you who might be listening that we're very happy to receive questions. So write them into the Q&A section and we'll see what we find and pass them on to our panel. I guess that's all I have to say. Now we have 5 to 7 minute comment each for Isil and for Gökhan. So Isil, first according to the plan.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi, Isil.
Hello. Thank you for your great introduction and great speech. And if it's okay, I can start. Okay. Hello. Firstly, thank you for having me. Idil Eser drove a great framework about Turkey, starting from the first points to the last point in Turkey, Gergerlioğlu, Kaftancıoğlu, etc. And in this speech, I would like to draw a different framework about the Istanbul Convention in Turkey, because this is the latest discussions and latest important and alarming issue in Turkey. Firstly, Istanbul Convention and it's some of the behind cases, legal achievements related to women in Turkey. And then I would like to try to explain what Istanbul Convention is and finally, the legal impact of the ratification of the convention and of its possible denunciation create. And I regretfully say that it's not possible. It's denunciated, and the European Council accepted this denunciation. And I mean that it's very important to show how much good has the convention done and how much bad would its denunciation create, since this convention had been implemented and applied at the courthouses, specifically first instance courts and the Turkish Constitutional Court in Turkey. So when we are talking about the Istanbul Convention and the protection of women, we are talking about the implemented and applicable convention and the cases and the law, etc. Therefore, while women have been saying it's a slogan, Istanbul Convention let you live, it's the huge slogan in Turkey, it's not an intangible or an agitative slogan. It's concrete and something very constitutive and tangible through the lives of women in Turkey. And I have a speech based on an article on mine published in a book titled "The Istanbul Convention, Effects and Implementation in Turkey," which I examined the 30 cases referred and cited the Istanbul Convention. Firstly, I would like to start with a question. Since the far-right populism has been increasingly spread over the world, how democracies die was the question by Levitsky, you know, and maybe the answer is so basic. Democracy dies fragmentarily, means that they try to take back our rights, which is obtained from the huge struggle. And in the political theory, these times of the world is called big regression because of the far-right populism. And starting from the environment to the basic rights, our achievements are at the high risks by the populist, far-right, and the oppressive governments. And the Istanbul Convention, one of the another target of the populist and far-right and conservative government in Turkey. Firstly, I start to the very small introduction about the convention. What is the convention and its the possible denunciation, and then tries to explain some of the legal issues and the political debates about convention. The convention had been written, it's very important, after the tragic case before the ECSR called the Nahide Opus case versus Turkey. Since in an internal policy in Turkey, the convention had been targeted as being a non-Turkish, which means that it's against our traditional so-called values. However, all declaration, preparation phase, and involvement of the women movement in Turkey to the convention procedures, it would be seen that this convention is made by data obtained from the Turkish cases. Bearer case of Opus was the proof of it. And in 2009, the court announced its judgment through by a victim of the domestic violence against the Turkish government for failing to protect her and her mother from attacks perpetrated by her husband. And ruling for the plaintiff, the court found that the Turkish government violated 3 articles of the European Convention on Human Rights: the right to life, the prohibition of torture and inhuman treatment, and the prohibition of discrimination. Critically, the Opus decision holds governments accountable for failing to take adequate steps to protect victims of repeated domestic violence, even absent any active malfeasance on the state's part. Additionally, the decision marked the first time the court recognized that the failure of states to address gender-based domestic violence can amount to a form of discrimination under the convention. Although Opus lodged a complaint about 36 times against her husband in Turkey, authorities did not take any steps, and finally the violence came to climax when Opus mothers attempted to move to another place in 2003. The husband confronted Opus mother, then slaughtered by the perpetrator. It's very important because the Istanbul Convention is written after this tragic case, and the convention explains and legally, normatively written as the violence against women, which is the violation of the human rights and the form of discrimination against women. And it means that all acts of gender-based violation that result in or likely to result in physical, sexual, psychological, or economic harm. And domestic violence had been recognized in this convention for the first time. It's very important because it means that all acts of physical, sexual, psychological, or economic violence that occur within the family or the domestic unit or between former or current spouses or partners, whether or not the perpetrator shares or has shared the same residence with the victim. The important key term and the discussions surrounding in the term of the gender of the convention, because the convention includes the social gender approach, and the gender means that the socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, attributes that a given society considers appropriate for women and men. And finally, gender-based violence explained and recognized as the violence that is directed against a woman because she is a woman and it's a gendered nature. The implementation of the provisions of this convention by the parties, in particular measure to protect the rights of victims, shall be secured without discrimination on any ground, such as race, gender, color, language, political or another opinion, national or social origin, national minority, property, disability, marital status, etc. So it's very, very important. The Istanbul Convention has been targeted by the right-wing old populists in Europe, for example, Poland, we know, Slovakia, Hungary, etc. However, the most important and the most discussive thing is in this sphere, European Union as the part of the convention. So while we are talking about the Slovenia and other European countries that tries to challenge the Istanbul Convention, there are other mechanisms in that. However, I examined the 30 cases before the Turkish Constitutional Court in Turkey, and I happily see that starting from the first instance court to the Constitutional Court, the convention had been applied. In a case, a man called Turgay claimed a case before the Turk Family Court based on Istanbul Convention. And finally, Constitutional Court decided that this man should be protected by the force of Istanbul Convention, and it means that the convention did not preserve women in an essentialist way. In domestic policy, Turkish government claims that our national law is also enough to protect women. However, there are important legal technical faults in this view, since Istanbul Convention is also within our national law, since it is human rights treaty, and Article 19 of the Turkish Constitution requires that the parliament ratify the human rights treaties by the legislation. There are some disputes that the president did not have a competence to withdraw from the convention, and it's technically true, since any law that is passed by the parliament cannot be subject to executive amendment under the constitution. The executive, that is the president, cannot exercise legislative functions, we know. However, I refuse to be part of these discussions, since even if the competent authority, which is parliament, tries to withdraw from the human rights treaty, it also shall be considered as a target against women. So our lives shall not be confined to the technical legal issues, and all these attempts much more dense. Another important topic to be mentioned is related to reasons of the government while denunciating the convention, because it shall be considered as a hate speech against group of its citizens, means that LGBTQ people in Turkey. Because Turkey communication director published a statement that the reason behind the withdrawal were provided as the LGBTQ people in Turkey, because according to them, Istanbul Convention legalizes the LGBTQ rights and LGBTQ community in Turkey, and it shall be considered as a hate speech as well. And in this statement, it's not acceptable in two ways. Firstly, the governmental statement is highly against the constitutional commitment to human rights and equality of all citizens, regardless of the social and family values and citizens may have. The Association of Research on Constitutional Law, which I have a member, as well as published a statement, says that normalization of homosexuality is the justification of withdrawal. Needless to say that it's an example of the hate speech against which may international treaties, such as the Istanbul Convention, but not ECSR, CCPR, CEDAW, and aims to struggle. And secondly, the country is mentioned in this statement, as I said before, under the high pressure of the far-right populism, and tries to make political intervention that condenses the constitutional rights of women, such as the right to abortion, LGBTQ rights, usage of the honor as a cause of remission, and extra good time in the criminal proceedings. And all the attempts are implied expression that crimes against these vulnerable groups are acceptable by the governments. Another point, even these countries dispute the convention, they all signed, however not ratified yet. Also EU, which those countries have been member, signed the convention, but Turkey's attempts is another issue, since it tries to withdraw its signature. So the classification of Turkey shall not be seen a category of these countries, such as Slovakia, Slovenia, Bulgaria, and Hungary. Turkey tries to replace itself in a category which Azerbaijan and Russia have been in, who is the worst states in the terms of the human rights context. So maybe I think this is my final, because my time is up. So if there is further questions, I would like to answer these questions as well. But the political speech and political reasons behind the Istanbul Convention disputes in Turkey surrounding in these disputes. So it's very important because I always said that women are try to struggle this convention and its implementation in Turkey right now.
Thank you so much. This is an incredibly important issue also because of the European discussion and the risk that several countries depart from the convention.
Exactly.
So we have a plan to make this a separate, an extensive topic in its own right on a later occasion. But of course, feel free to comment on it or ask questions. Now, some time is left for Gökhan, and I also would like to say that we will take the liberty of going a little bit over time to catch up with people who really have something in their hearts.
Yeah, that would be
to say.
That would be great, and I really wouldn't resent two beautiful speakers who overstepped their time, because there are many things to say and there are many things to grab. And I'm going to try to be short, just to make a recap about what has been said so far. First of all, I quote a cliche about Turkey, human rights in Turkey. Human rights in Turkey has never been perfect, but there is a shift in Erdogan's regime in the abuse of human rights. That the methods are more subtle, more soft, maybe softer, less brutal, but more pervasive. Well, what do we understand from less brutal? To compare it, we can remind one incident in 2000 before Erdogan, and the government was maybe the most democratic government of the recent Turkish history, at least by its name, the government of democratic left government. And in that year, there was a massive hunger strikes around the prisons of Turkey. And these hunger strikes were suppressed by 10,000 soldiers attacking these prisons, killing 32 people, leaving more than 400 people injured, and attacking by fire bombs, by napalm bombs into these prisons. That's why we understand from brutality. But today's Erdogan, at least for now, his men are not taking the guns and chasing people in the street and killing them extrajudicially, as for example, Duterte in Philippines is making. And is really being proud of it, just killing people extrajudicially. It's not happening yet in Turkey. This is more subtle. Erdogan is using the legal regime, invoking the illegality, invoking the arguments of the rule of law. And he's always using the law, and sometimes he's sidestepping the law, but mostly he's sticking to the legal regime, present legal regime, what he calls the rule of law in Turkey. So this is what the many observers say call autocratic legalism. It's a new phenomenon to explain the new autocrats, the new populist autocrats, to oppress the dissent, the opposition, as opposed to Cold War or pre-Cold War regimes that has taken brutal aspects like gulags or concentration camps or extrajudicial killings or forced disappearances. But there are these tortures and disappearances incidents in Erdogan's Turkey as well. But it's the nature is much more different than it was in the 80s or 90s in Turkey, which was under the military regime or under the tutelage of the military. So the methods of Erdogan's methods are gradual, and you can observe them in a cascade. Sometimes you see the criminal sanctions, sometimes the prosecutions itself can turn into be a way of oppression, which is called as judicial harassment. Just opening a case is enough. Just opening and writing an indictment is enough to cause a stress, because one criminal case can last over 2 years, and even if you're not if you're not tried in detention, it's a cause of stress that what's going to happen next, like thinking about for 2 years. And these indictments are just like written in a delusional way by fabricated evidences, and in the very way of post-truth era, right, in a populist language, without devoiding of any legal technique or legal methods. And these may be also, other than criminal harassments, other than criminal sanctions, there are tax investigations or administrative measures, disciplinary measures, which are made by so-called counter-majoritarian institutions, were all packed by Erdogan's regime. For example, Media Supervising Institute. He imposes very, very huge monetary sanctions to the dissenting opinions in the media. And if there is no administrative sanction, no criminal sanction by the government, then the public lynching or onslaught by the pro-government media may come. If the pro-government media doesn't work, then the trolls working in the internet, using this methods of cancellation culture or cancellation techniques to lynch one person who speaks dissident, so he either has to leave the country or he either has to resign from his post, etc. And this is what we call, as also Isil has mentioned, it is the populist threat, which is very pervasive in all around the world. Erdogan has his own way of populism, building on the old problems of Turkish human rights and democracy. So I may follow a recent paper that I read, how Erdogan's populism has affected human rights situation in Turkey. He examines in three titles, in three clusters. First is representation, second is exclusion, and the other is paternalism. As to representation, Erdogan, as every populist, claims to represent his own people, claims to empower his people, which was historically built upon center and periphery. Center and periphery is the general paradigm the comparative politicians use to examine Turkey because of the historical process of nation and state building in Turkey in the 1920s, when the sociological positivism was the norm, and the intellectuals of that time and statesmen of that time thought that it would be enough to modernize a society from top-down measures. So from then on, the right-wing tradition, as we call it, from the 50s, have been used in the center and periphery relations, which I think Norwegians are not really away from it. Norwegian people may be a little bit urban-rural division, which was also conceptualized by also our co-citizen Stein Rokkan here in Bergen. So it is a similar thing. Well, there are many differences, but very quite similar, that there is a modern living posh urban elite as opposed to traditional religious devout Muslim people who cannot access to many intellectual life, academic life, political life of the country, etc. So this is one thing. This is representation. Erdogan represents his people. And I can say he has improved to some extent, at least in his first years from 2002, and he gave some rights and he expanded rights and freedoms to his people. But rights and freedoms are offered to some at the expense of the others, to the other part of the society. This is an illustration of the Erdogan's conception of populist human rights. So, for example, women in the AKP apparatus who are active in the party apparatus are given voice, for example. And in the parliament, the AKP has the largest women after People's Democratic Party. No one can beat that, because pro-Kurdish plus, pro-democratic plus, pro-LGBTI, every right. So how many minutes shall I finish? Oh God, okay, just 1 minute. I'll finish in 1 minute. And it's like Bolsonaro. He has his supporters, women supporters, very fervent supporters, but all these women speak patriarchal. When it comes to the secularist, feminist, LGBTI people, of course, it is not for them to speak. It's only the IKP women who has the right to speak. Exclusion is the main concept, component of the populist regime, and the populist political leaders arrogate themselves, their people, they have the right to enjoy the human rights, while other people who are the enemies of the people do not have the rights to enjoy these human rights. So then we come to gross violations of human rights, where the executive decrees of after the 2016 attempted coup, where Idil has mentioned, the people were dismissed from their jobs, but not only this, the people were stripped from their legal personhood and they were left to a civil death. It's like apartheid, or it was like racial segregation. But one difference is it is Erdogan who decides who can enjoy Turkish citizenship rights and who cannot enjoy the Turkish citizenship rights. As when I say the Turkish citizenship rights, when you are a KHK person, which is commonly a denominator of the persons who are subject to these executive decrees, it's called a KHK. It's an abbreviation standing for executive decrees made after this attempted coup. If you're a KHK person, it means that you cannot work either in public or in private sector. You cannot take universal healthcare. You cannot enroll in university. You cannot even open a bank account. So you cannot travel because your passport is confiscated, and you're in under constant smear campaign because all your information is open, accessible to everyone that you can see in the newspapers, in the official gazette. Your name is written up in there. They can just check it if you are a KHK person or not. So this is one thing. This is what we call a new sort of apartheid, or a new sort of racial or ideological segregation. So 1 minute. Oh, finished. Okay, this I'm finished, but I had many things to say, but I'm finishing right now and leave the participants to the questions of the participants. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much to all three of you. And this is okay. We don't have many questions, but that's okay. There's more than enough to listen to and think over. And frankly, some new elements have come to light for me, which I find, deeply, deeply shocking. The segregation of a class of non-citizens or pseudo-citizens is a very, very scary move. And it's a move down a road that we've seen before in Europe, ending in very, very bad places. Now, I don't want to paint that monster on the wall here, but if we're trying to grasp all this together, I'd like to pose two questions, and then you can answer them or not, and say what you want. On the one hand here, we seem to have a system based on law. So it's a legal autocracy of sorts, but there's no rule of law, right? So there are no guarantees, and the procedural rights of citizens can always be breached, right? And you can be entirely excluded from enjoying any of those rights. So if you as belonging in some sense to the democratic opposition, and we in Europe as committed to democracy and rule of law, should pick one, pick one position to defend, or one problem to repair, considering this very grave dysfunctionality of the legal system. What would you pick? I mean, what would be the campaign subject and the advocacy subject to present for European politicians to start, to start somewhere, to repair something of critical importance? If you have any thoughts on that, that would be interesting. And then the other issue is, well, that of culture, right? Turkey isn't a homogeneous, scary Muslim country. It's incredibly complex, with a very complex history of strife between nationalist and multicultural, secular and religious, democratic and autocratic strands of thought and political movements. And during these last few years, a huge section of the political culture, a well-rooted, long-lasting political culture in Turkey, has been increasingly marginalized, but the people are still there in some shape or form, right? Where, what are the media? What are the forms of communication? What are the organizations that somehow carry on a different point of view, a democratic, the democratic ideas, which are still very broadly dispersed in Turkey? So
Well, these are very hard questions to answer because it's very huge. But from your second one, I can say the reason maybe the Turkish people has seen the worst. Well, many people say that Erdogan's regime is the worst since it was more pervasive. It's everywhere. You can see it everywhere. But during the military regimes, it was much more brutal, as they say. And there are people who have experience in fighting against these regimes up until today. And there is also one ethnic Kurdish insurgency, which is very organized. So since the foundation of the republic, so which doesn't step back. So no other regime could handle this situation. So this is one. Most of the time, the left or the liberals sometimes attach themselves to this Kurdish movement, as it is now, to the HDP party, because it is the most organized form of dissent formation. This is one reason. And the other ways of communication is, as you may imagine, it's the internet. The more the regimes tries to ban it or restrict it, the techniques of the internet, that you can just walk around this and you can make your own forum to discuss things, and or create your free forum to discuss the things. So the internet is very important, but also it's also a dangerous, because it's also a place where the post-truth mechanisms work in progress. The internet trolls, and the lack of true information is also a problem in internet. So this is a sort of the thing that we have to apply with prudence. As to your first question, I think, what would it be? I would say, if Erdogan is sure about his people, about his legitimacy, because he claims that he represents all the people. He claims that everybody loves in Turkey, and the ones who aren't loving him, or who just really doesn't praise him, are the people marginalized, very little in numbers, marginalized people who are the enemies of the people. If he's so sure about that, I would really recommend for an election of a constitutional assembly, constitutional convention, which is free of any party politics, and every city in Turkey choose their representatives, free of party politics, to make a new constitution, because the constitution of today is not a constitution. It's the one man's state, using manual. So if he's so sure about his legitimacy, we could ask to make a new constitution. Let's elect a new constitutional convention, just to make that constitution, a new constitution, which all the Turkish people would approve, if he thinks that, as he says, if Turkish people backs him. That's one thing that I would really advocate for. Yeah.
Very interesting, and maybe central points in the Istanbul Convention should be included in such a constitution.
Of course, yeah.
So,
this is
interesting, very interesting. I guess next one to ask for the word is Idil, please. You hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I want to comment on Gökhan's point. I would agree with him that in terms of ill treatment and other policies, Erdogan has not been as brutal as the military regime of 1980. But I think it can get brutal, and it is getting brutal. And I have talked to lots of people who have been in the court processes or in prisons in 1980s. And they said at that point, they could see the predictability of legal system. And even then, under military regime, law worked, functioned. Yes. I think that's the main problem today. It's totally unpredictable. It's like lottery. In some cases, you see two people are saying the same thing, and one of them is persecuted, the other isn't. So you cannot really understand the logic. And I also wouldn't undermine the capacity of the regime to get more brutal. It wasn't necessary up to this stage, and they also still need certain things from the outside community, I would say. And I would disagree with Gökhan in the sense that he has defined as some sort of a perfect citizen in his mind, Erdogan, and many people, secularists, Kurds, etc., LGBT people, lots of people who have some defects in his image are not regarded as citizens. I don't think he is talking to us anymore. We are discounted from citizenship. We are the unwanted in a way.
Well, if that's what I really wanted to say. So I think I would agree with that. If I had misformulated previously, it would be my fault. But that's what I wanted to say. Exactly what you said.
Yeah, it seems to me that you're touching the elephant, the same elephant from different
Yeah.
sides with different words, but a very similar point and a very disturbing one, I would say. Ishil, any comments from you?
Hello. They're all breath-rooting speeches from Gökhan Hoca and the Idil. And maybe I would like to emphasize another topic, which I am very, consistent with it, because in Turkey, all human rights discussions, such as detentions and curfews, hunger strikes, and Istanbul Convention, women violence against women, etc., is confined with the legal technical issues. And I'm very disturbed by this kind of technical legal issues. So, as I said before, it should be refused to be part of these discussions, because the legal techniques is used by the fragments and some of the umbrella techniques by the government in Turkey right now. So in Turkey, for example, I would like to mention some of the another points. The starting point of the targets against women is not start with the Istanbul Convention debates. For example, emergency phone line of the Family and the Social Ministry for Women, when there is an emergency, has been assigned for the pandemic health emergencies. So it means that the emergency in the emergency times out of pandemic in Turkey, women are not able to reach this phone line. Another important point to be mentioned is related to judiciary, because the first things what the government done in March 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, judges are authorized not to give the restraining order to the perpetrators under the mask of to protect the public health, even if for the situations that the Istanbul Convention required to do so. So since there is a travel restrictions, lockdowns and curfew, women are not able to run away from the crime scene and not to reach the women's shelter, for example. And finally, extra-legal and illegal, undue and unlawful withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention, which Turkey had a leading in its creation got before. So this is not, so the target against women does not start with the Istanbul Convention discussions. It starts with the just before it. And from my point of view, the withdrawal decision is much more dangerous than we thought, because all the small and big steps taken by the government target to create unprotected women who are left to the mercy of the women and state squabble, which I refer to President's statement, since the President Erdogan says after the denunciation Istanbul Convention withdrawal that we do not protect our women by the laws, but with our squabble and conscience. So women are left to do mercy of the president's squabble and conscience in Turkey right now. And I would like to say that the struggle and the intervention should be widespread around the country, and women are trying to do same and so.
Could I then ask a follow-up question for clarification? Would it be right to say that law with a relative level of predictability and consistency exists when you're not in politically sensitive terrain?
Well, it's the main question here is who is deciding what is political, and it's Erdogan who decides what's political and private these days. Just a little tweet of whining about the situation about Corona whining about not able to going out like everybody else, but as we all do in Facebook, for example, that, oh, Corona times is bad, maybe political, because it may imply a criticism against the government's handling of Corona. So this politically, during the 80s and 90s, the line was very, very clear, whether being political or not, it was very clear. But today, the line is very blurred between the political and private life. So it is Erdogan or his lynching group who decides what's political of that agenda. So any expression can be political, can be taken to be political first, and then can be taken to be a legitimate expression against government. So it is very volatile. There's no clear answer for that.
So a very central point in conventional theories of liberal democracy, right? To have a clear and protected distinction between public and private life.
Yeah.
And if that breaks down,
exactly,
then we're in trouble. Would you, all three of you, have lived and worked and studied Turkey, and you are Turks? What would you hope for from us, European states?
We don't hope anything, actually. This is what we have to deal with ourselves first. What we hope from you is, not you in Norway maybe, but what we hope from Europe is that populism wave to end in their homes, so that we can clear our own garden, because it is a mutual thing that feed one another. And by being, I remember something in the 90s, a picture. Le Pen was sitting with Alparslan Türkeş, two far-right people who should supposedly hate each other, because one is French, one is Turkish, and everybody loves their nations, so they should hate each other, but they were having a drink together. So they were friends. And still the same, you know, that's one thing, and which is very, Islamophobia is pervasive in Europe, and fight against Islamophobia is something very legitimate. But in Turkey, any argument about Islamophobia means to limit the criticizing, the legitimate criticizing of religion. So they are using each other's arguments very shrewdly. So what I would expect from Europe, to clean their own garden first, then we can be more peaceful without any bad experiences, bad examples from Europe.
Well, that's the very least you should expect, I think.
Well, we have to wait for a while.
We surely have historically. Yeah. Idil Eser.
I think I would agree with Gökhan that it's our problem and we have to find ways and means of dealing with it. What I would expect from Europe or European Union, or the Western countries, to be respectful to the values that they and criteria that they have supported in their own country, and to act with integrity.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm tired of seeing this double standard. I just want them to be respectful to their own values and ideas and criteria for all the countries. I think Turkey has to solve its own problem, but having that kind of respectful and integral behavior would help, I would say, in the long run, to West as well. I think we need somebody has asked if we have a unified and more organized opposition. I think I would agree that we have more organized opposition, but I doubt if it is unified. I think that's one of the main problems. We need really a different type of opposition that can be unified on values, principles, etc., and wouldn't go behind government in every policy, in every international issue. I mean, they should also bring out a common vision together if they really want to win the elections. And I think Erdogan will change the election law. That's my idea. I think he will change the rules of the game as he has done in other issues. And if necessary, he'll get more and more authoritarian, even totalitarian, I would say, if he sees that he's losing the popular support, and then it will be a total different ball game. But we are not there yet, so everything that I can say in that direction would be more like a prediction, like making predictions like Merlin. I wouldn't go there, but I think it's on the cards. I wouldn't put it besides anyone. I would also say that Islamic ideology will also play a part, and also did play a part in certain issues like withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention. But these are new issues that we have started to discuss in Turkey, and it's huge elephants in the room. I think these are very broad subjects that need to be discussed in its entirety. But I can say that we have an opposition problem. We have a coalition and alliance problem in civil society as well. It's too polarized. Everyone hates everyone, which prevents effective resistance. And also very obsessed and short-term thinking West, I should also add.
Yeah, I would add provocatively to Idil's comment that maybe West can stop supporting Erdogan because of its fear of receiving mass immigration from Syria. This should be the key.
Tricky expectation to present in Brussels, I'm afraid, but yeah.
And also NATO. I think NATO is also an important card, but I mean, they may have lost it already. I mean, for some reason, Europe is too late to understand its own problems. They are too observed with their own daily problems, and they are not. If I have to make a Game of Thrones reference, the White Walkers out there, and they are still thinking about who's get the throne kind of situation.
All right. Yes. Well, it's always a mixed pleasure to have people who know more about an issue confirm my preconceptions, but it's not so nice when those preconceptions are foreboding and scary. I think I'll now leave the last word to Isil, a couple of minutes, and we should round off because we're on overtime. Thank you to all of you. Isil, you have the last comment.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I agree with the Gökhan and the Idil's last points, because I would like to make some additional points in that regard. For example, Idil says that the union and the complementary part of the opposition is very essential for us. It's okay, it's true, because all opposition groups in Turkey should intersectionally with each other, because they are intersectional attacks from the government to the all opposition group in Turkey. So all groups should be together, and some of the civil society organizations, some of the institutions, for example, I know from the institutions from the ECSR judges tries to make them together. And however, we should be alarming, because the government, as I said, as I know from some of the listing of the RESMI official Gazette informations, for example, they tries to change the law on the union and alliance and tries to make them the election barrage to the alliance in the elections, and then it means that the opposition parties, opposition groups in Turkey should not bring them together, and then tries to under the election.
Yes, so they're using gerrymandering tactics, to paraphrase. They are very manipulative gerrymandering tactics.
Yeah, they're trying to gender-demanding activities. And another point, for example, from my point of view, European Council shall not be accept this kind of withdrawal denunciation because it is not by the competent authority. However, they accept it. So it's very important because some of the representatives from the Turkish Women Coalition in there, and I talked from them, and they said that the European Council thought that the Turkish Ministry of the Foreign Affairs announced the denunciation, and then it's over. However, from our point of view, it's not the competent authority because it's not the competent with the legal issues in Turkey, so it should not be considered. It should not be accepted by the Council of Europe, but it is. And another point I would like to mention, in Turkey, we are discussing the 19 and 21 constitution, which states that the official religion of the Turkey is Islam. And we are discussing this kind of the disputes related to 19 and 21 constitution. So in Turkey, I think all alarming issues are set down in the constitutional process and constitutional debates in Turkey, and not only we are trying to tackle with the Istanbul Convention or violence against women, but also we should tackle with the other foreign institutions of we are member, and for example 19 and 21 constitution as well. So it should be complementary opposition and the intersectional opposition that the government tries to attack with all powers to all groups in Turkey.
Wow, this seems like, you know, the start of a very, very interesting discussion. Now we're at the end. I'd like to summarize. I mean, one thing that we should do, support in any shape or form, I guess, is defense of the last line of defense for democracy in Turkey, which would be the ability to organize coalitions, oppositional coalitions, and run for office, right?
Exactly.
If that's lost, then democracy is completely gone. So that's a critical issue. And then we should place our money where our mouth is when it comes to the foundational principles of the Council of Europe, the European Convention of Human Rights, and also, as far as possible, NATO as a defense of liberal democratic order of state. That won't be easy, but if we mean something,
and
we should stick to it.
I would add, European Court of Human Rights is not doing a good job these days as regards the justice in Turkey, because he's selectively using some cases in Turkey, which I will not mention now because that will open up a new way of discussion. But I have this feeling the European Court of Human Rights is also haunted by the populism of Erdogan in I don't know how way, but the European Court of Human Rights is haunted in some way. From the last decisions, I can see that. Also, there was a very scandalous situation where the head of European Court of Human Rights came to Turkey and visited Erdogan and visited some small city in the east with Erdogan. I don't know why. So these are all shaky situations as regards to European Court of Human Rights, and which gives us very skeptical against, which leads us to be skeptical now these days, whether it can prevent human rights in Turkey, protect.
Okay, dear friends in Law Transform, take notes, right? We have a series of very, very interesting seminar germs spread out here. I think we should call it a day. Thank you so much to all of you, perhaps especially Isil, working from Turkey. And I think I'd also like to say to the European citizens and human rights activists and academics that, well, we should really try to bring these people into our discussions as often as we can. They are kind of an avant-garde into a future that we want to avoid. And they're also Democrats who have had their convictions tested under circumstances sharper than ours. So we should learn from each other as much as as possible, and bring, experiences reaching beyond what we take for granted in wherever we live, to sharpen our understanding and our ability to protect our institutions and the principles they build on. So thank you so much for being here, everybody, and have a nice remainder of the Friday, and have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.